Welcome to the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Lautermilch, Chief Editor at Smart Publishing, and this is the podcast where we explore all things writing, publishing, and the impact of storytelling. In each episode, I'll share insights and strategies to help you navigate the book journey, whether you're writing, publishing, or already an author. Plus, you'll hear from inspiring authors who are using their book to change lives. And if you're passionate about storytelling and ready to make an impact, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Now let's get started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm your host, Renée Lautermilch, Chief Editor of Smart Publishing, and I'm really excited about today's episode. Like I hinted on last week's episode, I was going to have a guest on today, and I have that guest on today. We're here to talk about him, his business, his book, his entire journey with writing his book. I couldn't be more excited to introduce Victor Fernandes to you. Victor is a proud husband, father, stepfather, and personal assistant to two very active hound dogs who found his passion for health and helping people late in life. With the memory of shedding 75 pounds permanently imprinted on his heart and mind, he chose passion over paychecks on February of 2019 at the age of 48. When he ended a 26-year-long career in sports journalism to change lives for the better as a health and fitness coach, just like a coach did for him a decade earlier. So he actually lives with his family now, living the beach life, jealous. And he launched his business, Fernandes Fit LLC, in January of 2021 at the height of the post-COVID shutdown. And as we, myself and Jonathan, have watched his story. Despite all of the challenges and the obstacles, they have been thriving. And part of that thriving is he wrote a book. It came out in February. I can't believe it's already been a few months. It's called Reclaiming My Authentic Self, A Journey from Fear to Freedom. And it's a compelling memoir of self-discovery, courage. It's really all about him confronting his fears and family bonds, reflecting on, sort of his father's unfulfilled potential in life, the strength of his selfless mother and his own journey toward a life beyond fear. And it's a story that inspires all of us to embrace authenticity, face our self-doubt head on, and reclaim this life that we have. So, Victor, welcome to the show. I'm honored to have you on, and I would love for you to go a little bit farther to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And that intro was incredible. I'm going to have to hire you for like private parties, so I can walk in grand style. But I greatly appreciate it. Yes, I started my my fitness career, my personal fitness career plus my professional fitness career much later in life than most. I was 250 pounds up until about 15 years ago. And then my youngest son, Zach, was born. And that we all have that moment in time where we say it's now or never. This is the breaking point. And that was the point for me when the nurse, as corny and cliche as it may sound, nurse handing me my son for the first time. And I look at him and sadly, one of the first thoughts I had was, will I be around long enough to see him grow up? I took stock of myself in that moment and realized there were so many formative steps in his life, milestone moments in his life that were forthcoming that I might not be around for. And that scared the living daylights out of me. It really did. And it started finally my journey after so many years of stops and starts. It started me finally on a journey where I lost, like you said, about 75 pounds. And when I share that number, yes, people are impressed by that number, but that number is such a small part of it. To me, it was what it signified. It was opportunities that were no longer going to slip away because I wasn't going to let them slip away. It's having the confidence to go after things you want and not talk yourself out of it because you don't feel confident enough in yourself to actually tackle something that makes you uncomfortable. And as I was going along, losing that weight, getting healthier, I started to realize, well, what I'm doing right now in my life isn't really what I want to do. I just thought that's what I needed to be doing as an adult. I needed to get a solid job, earn a steady paycheck, raise a family, buy a house, the whole 9 yards. And at no point in time was there ever any thought of what actually made me happy. And that's when I started to realize, as much as I enjoyed the newspaper industry, I was in it 26 years, covered a lot of great events, met a lot of great people, interviewed a lot of great people. But I realized that wasn't my passion. My passion was to help people, much like my family has helped me. My first coach has helped me. Heck, my current coach has helped me. And I realized that, it was an opportunity for me to make an impact, not just make a paycheck. And that's when I shifted into the health and fitness industry. And so much has happened since then, writing the book being, one of the cornerstone moments. And the job you and Jonathan did with me, because I know it wasn't the easiest to deal with at times, was incredible. And I'm forever grateful and humbled by that. And, and just a lot of things that have happened that still seem surreal, the book included, that would never have happened if I hadn't taken that step the moment they handed me my son for the first time.
That's amazing. I resonate with that so much as someone who had her own kid later in life. I had my daughter when I was 39, and I was in decent shape and everything. So I can't even imagine when you're 75 pounds overweight and that happens, because even me in decent shape, that was one of the first things that came through my mind is what are all the things that I can continue to do and really focus on and button up on to make sure that I'm here to watch my daughter grow up. I get to live as old as I can possibly live to be a part of her life. So that's a huge catalyst moment. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the paradigm shift that you went through and where that paradigm shift came from. Writing the book was something that I know was deeply personal for you, as we all love our parents, and we all want to honor our parents, and your parents did such an amazing job with providing for the family and everything. But you talk a lot about the toll that took on them and how that sort of passed over onto you and your beliefs about what you were supposed to do in life. So I would love for you to dive deeper into all of that.
Well, that was the hardest part of the book, writing that. I mean, you said it exquisitely. My parents I'm proud to be their son. I'm proud to be named after my late father. So the hardest part about writing this book was the dynamic between sharing the learned lessons rooted in fear. They weren't intentional. It's just what was passed on, and not making it seem like I was blaming them, like it was somehow their fault. One of the lines in my book is, and it's all my fault. Once I realized that, I realized I could take control of myself. To me, everything that I either do or don't do in life is my fault. Doesn't matter if somebody else is involved. I'm going to look at it as, what role did I play in it? Why did it succeed? Why did it fail? And what was my imprint on it? And be able to learn from that respect, as opposed to just simply pointing fingers, because that's the easy thing to do. So for me, once I was able to start corralling that, if you will, and I still do. I mean, I think we all do it till the day we die, is getting to my parents to understand that as well. And it was extremely difficult with my dad, because there were two sides to my dad: before he suffered his last stroke and afterwards. And this was about 7-8 years ago. And prior to that, I was envious of him, because he had the head of hair I didn't. I always tell people he passed away with more hair on his head than I have. He always had this thick head of hair. He looked 20 years younger than he was. He was on point. He was sharp. He was athletic. He was going to the gym 3 times a week. He was doing things. I mean, he did things with his bare hands that I to this day still can't do. I didn't inherit, that gene from him, those traits from him. And then when he suffered that stroke, it wasn't so much the physical toll it took on him. It was the mental and emotional toll. He essentially did, I'm not going to mince words, he gave up. He decided it wasn't worth working to get back to where he was. It wasn't worth putting in the effort. And he basically, again, not going to mince words because there's no sense in soft soaping it. He was waiting to die. And he passed away, unfortunately, about a year and a half ago. And I turned my attention at that point to my mother because she's the consummate Western European old-fashioned mother and wife. She was the glue that kept the family together. She was the rock. She was everything to all of us except to herself. Everything she did for us, she would never do for herself. It's all she knew. All she knew was putting herself last and everyone else first. And over those last, 7, 8 years before my dad passed, she was a prisoner in her own home, much like he was. She was his sole caretaker. I live in North Carolina, they're in New York, so I'm 12 hours away. So she was his sole caretaker. And even when they had help, that was the mentality she had. She had to be everything to everyone. And the goal once he passed was, I was hoping that we could free her of those chains, if you will, that she put around herself. And we're still at the point of she is a prisoner in her own home, even though she doesn't have really anyone to take care of anymore. And that was the lesson I wanted to impress upon people, is that it's never too late. Number one, I don't care if you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years old. It's never too late to not just exist in your life, but live your life to the fullest, to do the things you want to do. That's where health and fitness comes in. And you worked in that industry as well. It's about quality of life. We want to do at 50 what we were able to do at 40, at 60 what we did at 50, without getting out of bed and feeling like we got hit by a bus. That's what we want. We want to be able to enjoy life to the fullest. And, it's still a work in progress with my mom. It never really happened after, post-stroke with my dad. And it's something that every time I have a conversation with my mom, I remind myself of, that at the very least, I need to live my life that way.
Listeners, if you need to rewind, go back, listen again, because that's such an important message. There's these moments that we have where they can be a catalyst for change, or we can just keep doing what we've always done. And I think that's a big thing that your story highlights, Victor, is that you could have just kept doing what was safe and what you had always done. Kind of sort of the same way your mom is right now, where like she almost doesn't know a different way. It's all she's ever known, all she's ever done, and it's where she's comfortable. You stepped into the unknown. You chose to face that fear head on, go straight into it, and carve out a new life. I'd love for you to now transition into talking about, the day that you quit a 26-year-long career must have felt like jumping off of a ledge without being able to see the bottom, and then stepping into an industry that you'd never worked in before. What was that like? Not just for you, but you've got a family, of course, when you're doing those things. And you hear a lot of people say like, oh, I'd love to do that, but I have responsibilities. And that's a big part of your book, it is breaking past that idea that you have to be imprisoned by your responsibilities. You can still thrive in your dreams and help bring your family along the way and have them thrive. So I would love to hear about what was that like for you personally, jumping off the ledge, but also how did you manage to do it with your family coming along with you instead of saying, this is crazy, you can't do it? No. Enlighten us. Share the wisdom.
Well, like I said earlier, I spent 26 years in the journalism industry, and I tell people I love 24 of them. The last two, it became a paycheck. It became a paycheck over passion. I was the kid growing up who loved sports. I still do. I'm still a kid at heart when it comes to sports. And I was also the kid, and my mom will attest to this, and my godmother, if she were still alive, may she rest in peace, would attest to this as well. I was the kid, 8, 9, 10 years old, who would read the newspaper out loud from cover to cover. You could hear me throughout the house because I loved reading. I loved newspapers. I loved learning about what was going on, especially in the sports world, but in general as well. So when I realized, when I was thinking about it, I got to high school, college, what am I going to do with my life? I realized, well, I love writing. I love sports. Why can't I bring those two together and not just build a career, but build a passion, something that I truly love, so it doesn't feel like work? I mean, how could being able to go to a sporting event, which I already do, and go write about them, which I already do, how could that ever possibly feel like work? And it didn't for 24 years. And then the last two, it became a point where I did not look forward to what I was doing each and every day. I couldn't watch a sporting event for fun. The thrill, the passion had just been ripped out of me those last couple of years. And I think in part it was because I wasn't the healthiest as well. I mean, I think that obviously played a role in it. But I realized that I was just doing something for the sake of doing it, to collect a paycheck, to support my family, to make sure I was doing what I was taught an adult and a parent and a husband is supposed to do. And the more I thought about it, I realized, well, all right, here's the formula. We, go to college, we get a degree, we get a good job, we earn a steady paycheck, we get married, we have kids, we buy a house, we raise those kids in that house, we raise our family, and then what? What comes after that? I was never taught that there was anything after that. And again, it's my parents were well intentioned, but the goal for them was doing what they needed to do each and every day with no thought to what was going to happen in the future, no thought to how am I going to enjoy the fruits of all that labor. So I realized I needed to do something that was going to spark that passion again. And it actually worked out well in the sense that, I started getting my certification through the National Academy of Sports Medicine while I was still working full time. I'd do all my work on the weekends and I'd work during the week. And I was able to get it done in about 3-4 months, and really didn't do anything for the first nearly a year having that certification. I didn't do anything at all with it because, again, it's that process of taking that step and knowing you're going to fall off that ledge like you shared earlier and not knowing what was going to happen. Was I going to keep falling? Was I going to come crashing to earth? What was going to happen to me? And that's a scary proposition, and especially when you have family. And frankly, without them, it wasn't going to happen, because I can tell you this much. I know my wife was scared deep inside. She wouldn't tell me that. She was always there supporting me. She was the one that came to me and said, when I asked her, what am I going to do next if I'm not going to do sports writing? It's all I've ever done. Well, duh, what have you been doing? I tell people it wasn't an aha moment. It was one of those duh moments. Like, what have you been doing? You've been working out, taking care of yourself, getting in better shape, getting healthier. And what was happening along the way? In the beginning, you were the one asking other people in the gym questions about, hey, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? How'd you get to this point? And now people are asking you those very same questions. Put 2 and 2 together. Even though I wasn't very good at math, still am not, I realized, well, yeah, I can help people doing this. I can take from my own experiences, both what I did and working with a coach as well, and be able to help people. And and it worked out well, because at that particular point in time, we had thought about leaving Erie, PA, where we had lived for 15 years and built a life there. We wanted to go live the beach life. So we moved to Ocean City, Maryland, and I took a job at a gym in town, which was a great opportunity, small boutique style gym. There was only 5 or 6 of us on staff. So everybody had their hands in everything. So I was able to see the inner workings of how to run a gym. I didn't want to run a brick and mortar gym myself, but it showed me how to build a business, what to do, what not to do. And one day I was just kind of looking around at the clientele, the members that were in the gym at one particular day. And I prided myself on getting to know all of them, their names, their families, what their goals are, the workouts they did, the equipment they used, the classes they took. I prided myself on knowing that. And as I'm looking around the room, I'm thinking, these people all come in here and work extremely hard, but there's so many of them that aren't making any progress. What's the difference? What's the common thread there? And I realized it was what they were doing once they left. Were they going down the street having pizza and drinking beer? Were they staying up all night watching Netflix instead of getting good night's sleep? And I realized that was the basis of where my business began, And then lo and behold, COVID hits. Again, I'm not making light of it, but it was the perfect time for me personally. Obviously, I know a lot of people suffered during those times, but it was a good time for me because it was basically a slap to the head and say, now's the time to start, building your business. And I knew that if I took it online, especially, it was COVID proof, and I could start building my business that way from a comprehensive perspective: nutrition, fitness, mindset, all of that. So that's where it started for me. So there were some moments in time that actually worked out well, to my advantage, but it took my family really being there, being the foundation of it all, because without them, it wasn't going to happen. I don't think, looking back, I was strong enough individually to make it happen. Without them, I wouldn't be here talking to you about this right now.
That's such a that's such an unexpected thing to say, because there's so many people where it's almost as if having a family would hold them back, whereas not having a family would have held you back. Having a family was a source of strength, a source of motivation and inspiration like nothing else I can imagine, because it's like you have no choice but to make it happen. Where are you today? So we've gone through upbringing, jumping off the ledge, getting in business. Where are you with Fernandes Fit LLC today? Your family, I know you guys, didn't stay in Maryland. Now you're in North Carolina. Would love for you to bring everybody up to speed before we jump into more of the book writing process and how all that was.
Well, we moved down here to North Carolina. We're just south of Wilmington. We're between, if people know the Mid-Atlantic region, we're between Wilmington and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So yeah, we're about 15 minutes from the water. So we're definitely living, I guess, close to the beach life. And it's actually been a godsend. As much as we loved our time in Maryland, Ocean City is a tough place to make a living because it's a very transient population. It's a tourist attraction, and that's what the foundation of their success is built upon. But for the locals, it makes it a lot more challenging to earn a living. So when we moved down here, I was able to start building connections, start building that foundation of, different business partners and networking partners and so forth. And the business really started to thrive. I've been able to incorporate the virtual aspect along with the in-person aspect, which is real nice. So we're almost the business itself is about 4 or 5 years into it fully, in full time. And it's probably about 6 years, all in all. So we live in North Carolina now. We've been down here now about 3 years. And we're loving it down here. My wife is working with special needs individuals, it's her sweet spot. She did it for many years in Pennsylvania. She's got the personality, the mindset, the patience, the determination, the passion for helping people. We've got our 2 older boys. We actually left them behind. Our oldest is a 5-year veteran of the Ocean City, Maryland Police Department. And he's part of the SWAT team, part of the K-9 unit as well. Our middle son, Nick, he's getting married in September, as a matter of fact, this coming September. He is an aspiring firefighter living in West Virginia now. And we've got Zach. If you follow me on social media, I gush a lot about him. He's 14 going on 35. He's a freshman. He's an old soul. He's a freshman in high school, and he's going down that path of figuring out what he wants to do in life. And he's taking an avid interest in not just my personal business, but the business world in general. He does a lot with me. I call him my PR director. I've got to put him on payroll. He doesn't realize that he probably should be getting paid by now. But again, my family is actively involved. My wife is the creative director. Anything that involves anything artistic, creative, it goes through her because I don't have that side to my brain. So it goes to, if she says yay, I'm 2 thumbs up for it. And I said, Zach's my PR director. We go to community events, and he's the one that gives me the hand signal to say, Dad, I got this. You can go just do something else over there off to the side. So it's been an absolute godsend. We love it down here. I know one thing we're working on. My wife has been avidly working on this. She's got notebooks filled with it. Is we're very interested in the RV life once Zach graduates high school. So she has been collecting more information that I wouldn't know what to do with, on the all aspects RV life. And so that's something we're looking forward to as well. So again, it's all surreal because without them, without making the change in my life, there's just no way I would be where I'm at right now. No chance, no chance at all.
Yeah, an incredible example of building a life by design for sure. And then RV life next. We have an aunt and an uncle actually who, once their kids were old enough and left the house, they're living the RV life right now, and they love it. So let's switch to the book. So
Mm-hmm.
you had this moment where you'd probably been thinking about writing a book for a while, and then you actually decided, I'm going to do this. I would love for you to talk through what that process was for you, because there's so many people that we talk to who say, I've been thinking about writing this book for like 10 years now, 7 years now, 12 years now, all these years, and there's a moment where a switch just flips on and you say, okay, I'm gonna do this. I really want to do this. And then you take the steps to make it happen. What was that mental process for you?
You mentioned 10 years, multiply that. Because for me, having been in the journalism industry as long as
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted to write a book. I didn't necessarily know exactly what I wanted to write about, but I always wanted to take that step in my career. And again, wasn't confident enough in myself to actually take that step. So I was always talking myself out of it. I'll start it in 6 months. I'm really busy right now, or then 6 months would come and nothing would happen. And it's no different than the stops and starts of people's health and fitness journeys. We start it, we do it for a while, we get a little bit of success, and then the success slows down. We say life gets in the way. We get frustrated, we get disappointed, we quit, and then 6 months, a year later, we try it again to the same results, the hamster on the wheel, theory. Same thing was happening for me. I just think I got to a point. I didn't want Jonathan to get mad at me. Number one, I didn't want to catch his wrath if I didn't finish this book. Number one, but I really just reached a point where it's like, you know what, you just got to do it, no matter how scared you are, no matter how much you may think that you don't have something good to say, that people aren't going to pick up the book, that people aren't going to resonate with what you're writing about. I just got to a point where it's like, I'm going to write it, and whatever happens after that, and I'll accept that. And when you finally just say the heck with it, I think it takes some of that pressure off, some of that fear away, because you're just doing it. And I have to credit both you and Jonathan, because I was getting in my own head early on in the writing process. I'd started it prior to my dad passing and then set it down for a bit, after he passed. And I was looking at it as a journalist. As a journalist, you are the storyteller. You are not the story. You are on the outside looking in, sharing with people what's going on the inside, while you're safely ensconced away in the outside. When you suddenly become the story, especially the topic that I was tackling, that's scary as scary can be, and not. And you almost feel embarrassed a little bit, because we're human beings and we're flawed and we make mistakes and we make poor decisions and we learn the wrong lessons and all that. And we feel embarrassed a little bit, as if nobody else has ever done that ever in our lifetime, ever. And everybody feels that way. And for me, once speaking to both you and Jonathan, when you guys suggested speaking it, when you suggested recording, like we're having a conversation right now, that made all the difference in the world. All of a sudden, it was just coming out, because I wasn't worried about the journalism side of my brain. That was finally turned off, because I was just having a conversation. Didn't have to make sense. Didn't have to be in any particular order. It didn't have to be really good English. It just had to be. I just had to put it out there, and then at that point get it transcribed. I can go there and edit it. You did a brilliant job editing as well, and it made it sound like good English. It didn't, trust me, what you read in the book, it's not what it sounded like when I was talking. Trust me on that one. But once that started flowing, hearing those words, even though I was the only one in the room, was cathartic to me. It almost was like I had it, cooped up inside, and I was finally just able to let it all out. And I think that's the difference right now between myself and my mom, is that those same lessons are ingrained in her, just like they're ingrained in me. She hasn't let them out yet.
Mm.
I think that's the biggest difference. So that once I did that, I think the book started to come a lot more freely, and I was able to get into a good groove, and I actually started to enjoy the writing process because I wasn't sitting there actually trying to write it. And it was starting to come. I mean, you saw I was starting to get it, one or two a week, getting it out there, being a little more consistent than I had been prior. And it just became much more enjoyable. But I think it was a sense of relief for it to get out there, that I really, when it came time to publish it and put it out there, I wasn't as scared about it as I was when I was writing it, because it was out there. I mean, to me, it was out there. Everybody knew. The only difference now is they're going to see it in print.
Right, right. That's just for our listeners, just so you know, once Victor got started, he was very consistent, like super consistent. Like he said, like 1 to 2 per week coming to me. And I think your book ended up, what was it, around 24 chapters, I
Something like
think?
that, yeah.
I think it was 24 chapters on the nose. And for those of you listening who are like, oh my gosh, is that how many chapters I have to write for a book? Victor's chapters were shorter. In a Word format, they were about 2 to 3 pages max. So his book ended up somewhere over, it was like 130 pages or something once it was finally formatted. But yeah, I love that you shared some of the inner feelings of like embarrassment, or some people might call it shame or something, and how really it's just the human experience is what you came to realize. And it's like this, I'm not the only one in this. There are other people who experience these things and feel the same way. And now your book has actually had the chance to be out there for a couple of months. So I would love to hear, what has the response from readers been? And is it what you thought it would be? Has it helped you kind of overcome any last sense of imposter syndrome or fear of getting the message out there? I'd love for you to talk about all of that.
Well, the response across the board has been really what I was hoping. I wasn't expecting, because you never know what could happen, but it was what I was hoping for, is people taking not even necessarily the entire book, but finding something within that book that resonates with them, that says, yeah, I'm going through that right now, or I used to go through that. Because that's how the health and fitness industry works. It's a lot of conversations with people and hearing about their struggles. And I'm sure you felt the same way when you were in the industry, and even now with helping people publish their books. You're hearing people share their feelings of struggle, of fear, of lack of confidence, and something always resonates. Yeah, I know how that feels. I remember when. And you can share that experience with people. That's what the book I was hoping would do, is mimic the conversations I have with people, to say, hey, I know where you're coming from by saying that, because I went through that very same thing when, and then I can share that experience with people. And that's what's happened, is people come to me and say, yeah, man, it felt like you were talking to me. It felt like you wrote the book specifically for me. That was the very first person, a friend of mine, whose father, unfortunately, was a good friend of mine. He passed away a few years ago. And she read the book, and she had some of the same struggles with her father. And she's like, I read it in 2 days, and I felt like you were talking to me. And I said, that's exactly, I mean, it floored me, number one, because even though you're hoping it happens, it still hits home when somebody says that. But that's what I was hoping for, is people to take something from it, have it resonate with them, and resonate enough that it gives them that boost of confidence, not motivation necessarily, but confidence to tackle it, to do something about it. Because ultimately, if you read the book and if you read any book, any self-help book, any self-development book, if you read the book but you don't implement any of the action points within it, they're just words. So hoping that people will take action with it, and implement it into their own daily lives. I mean, ultimately, I want people to learn from my mistakes a lot faster than I did.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of conversations with authors and quite a bit this week actually, where there's this sentiment where, you know, why write it? Every book has ever been, that could ever be written has already been written. Everybody's already written about this, and as an editor, I've got a bit of a different perspective because I actually get to see a lot of these books. And um, one of the things that I like to talk to people about is that when you infuse your story into it, that's a book nobody's ever written. That's a book nobody's ever read. They couldn't have, because it's completely unique to you as a person. And what I love about your book is that it's what I call like an instructional memoir. Although it is a memoir, it is in the self-help genre, but it's not one of these sort of sterile self-help books that some researcher wrote with based off of all of this clinical and psychological research with little case studies here and there. No, it is raw, it's authentic, it's genuine. It's somebody who was in the trenches of actually learning these lessons, doing something about it and making it happen. And for me, like I could read some kind of sterile self-help book, and I could read your book, and your book is most likely to create a transformation in me, because it's not about information I'm reading about an actual personal experience and somebody who actually did that. And so if you read Victor's book, in which case I really hope you do, it's available on Amazon, Reclaiming My Authentic Self by Victor Fernandes, with an S, not a Z. um it it in the best way possible. I mean this, it's an ass kicker. It's something where you sit there and you read it and you understand how fast life can go by, and how if you don't stop and grab it by the horns, it will carry you wherever the wind blows, versus you intentionally creating a life where you truly gave it everything you got to go after your dreams. You took your family along, and so yeah, just wanted to add that in there, because I've just been having those conversations, and I've had a couple people comment on that, and it's like, yeah, you could read two books about the same thing, but because of the way that they're written, one book, oh, that's a nice book, and the other book, that's what makes the difference for the reader. And that's what becomes a catalyst for a reader to do, as you said, make an actual change, instead of just adding it to my Goodreads 100 book goal list to say I've read 100 books this year. Okay, did it actually do anything for you? Okay, so as we're landing the plane here, I've been seeing you all over social doing book signings and really, really cool stuff with your book. And this is something that a lot of people struggle with after their book is released. And so I know that we've got a lot of people who are listening to this podcast who are either thinking about writing a book, they're in the process of writing a book, or they've already written a book. And they're wondering, or they should be wondering, how do I continue to leverage my book after it's released? So what has that looked like for you? How have the signings been going? What else are you doing with the book? I'd just love for you to impart any kind of advice that you have for authors after they release their book. What do they do?
Well, I know for me, living in the area where we do right now in southeastern North Carolina, it's and I've lived in other parts of the country and never experienced anything like this myself. This area is very old school. They like to do things very old school ways. They like physical business cards. Nothing on your phone that you have to scan a QR code for. They love in-person networking. None of this virtual stuff. They love being face to face, and they love the old school book signing where people can come together, and buy the book and talk to one another and interact with one another and just have a really good time being around one another. So that was the first thing before I even started thinking about it. That was the first thing people were asking me. Hey, when's the book signing? I hadn't even begun thinking about it yet, and I'm already being asked when I'm having a book signing. So I reached out to a good friend of mine named Keisha Starr, who's written 2 or 3 books in her day, and asked her for just some advice on how to go about planning it. And again, this area tends to be segmented into 3 sections. There's Wilmington proper, and there's Brunswick County where we live, the northern half and the southern half, and you don't have a whole lot of crossover. So what I ended up doing was holding a book signing event in each of the 3 areas, but I also tied it into a local business that in one way, shape, or form had a connection to the theme in the book. A prime example of it is I have friends of mine who own an ice cream and popcorn shop. Best ice cream and popcorn on the planet, by the way. Mimi and Papa's, awesome. And they're 2 older folks, they're retired, who decided to open up a family business. The entire family works in it.
That's awesome.
And so you're talking about two older people who are roughly about my parents' age, who aren't just sitting around waiting to die. They're living life, and they chose to do it in a business perspective because that's what they had done in their earlier adult lives, was open and run businesses. So having that connection to to a different theme in the book, and then bringing people together. And the good thing is, in this past nearly 3 years, it'll be 3 years in June since we moved here, the support here locally for anything I've done, my family's done, Fernandes Fit has done, has been beyond anything I could have ever imagined when we first came here. And people came out, and people, hey, where can I buy the book? Hey, I want it signed. I want your autograph, which is still weird to me that people ask me for my autograph. I just can't wrap my mind around that, because I don't feel like somebody who is important enough to give an autograph. It's just weird. But it's still nice to hear. So being able to go through those experiences and being able to interact with the community has been huge. Certainly, getting it out there on social media is a big part of it. Starting to combine it with different programs that I offer, be it an online course or whatever it may be. Really, I didn't set out to make a whole bunch of money writing this book. That was, if it happened, awesome. It would have been a nice bonus. But the idea was I wanted to get this book into as many hands as possible in as many ways as I could think of as possible to help have it impact people's lives. And if there's a direct impact where, hey, people decide to sign with me and become a client of mine or whatever it may be, awesome. But that would be a bonus, not the reason, not the purpose. And being able to do it that way to really want to be out there and help people, because that's why I took the leap off that ledge, is to be able to help people, because it makes me feel good. I don't know who gets more excited when clients reach a goal, them or me. It's so much fun. You would think I achieved that goal as much as I enjoy it. So that's the big, is putting yourself out there. I mean, no matter how you choose to do it, and it's going to be unique to your strengths, what works best for you, what area of the country you're in. If I had tried this in New York City, it probably wouldn't have worked because it's so saturated. But the area that we're in, which is, I always like to call it the smallest big city I've ever been involved with, it works here. But no matter how you do it, it's getting out there and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, in situations that they're not easy for you. I love public speaking. So to be able to go out there and talk to people is great. I've had people say, hey, I'm part of, book clubs, and we each get to bring in a book, we each get to recommend a book every month. So I want to bring you in so you can talk about the book, things. I love doing things like that. I love talking to people about it. So putting yourself out there in uncomfortable situations where you're in front of people and just sharing your story. I mean, you can't get much more personal, impactful than that.
That's amazing. And that segues perfectly into my last question that's going to help us land the plane here. To our authors who are listening and our aspiring authors who are listening, if you could leave them with just, one piece of wisdom, what would you say to them?
Your story matters, and not just to you. It's going to matter to other people. For me, it was helping people not spend 20 years tripping over themselves. That's my one regret that I'll take to my grave is, and I know all these things have happened for a reason to get me to this point, But it's hard not to stop and think, man, how far would I be if I'd started this 5, 10 years, 15, 20 years earlier? How much further along in life would I be right now? It's hard not to think that way because we're human. So your story matters. So, and it's going to matter to somebody out there, and more than likely more than just one somebody. Put it out there. It's people are going to be impacted by it, and you're just going to feel like, why didn't I do this sooner? That was the first thought. Why didn't I do this sooner? 30 years I could have done this. 30 years ago. Why didn't I? And I try not to think about that anymore. I try to live in the moment with it. But for all of you out there, if you're right, go ahead and just do it. It matters. You lived it. For that reason alone, it matters. And people need to hear about it.
Amazing. And absolutely incredible. Could not have thought of anything better myself to leave our listeners with. And listeners, with that, thank you for joining another episode of the Smart Publishing Impact series. And go now to Amazon, check out Victor's book, Reclaiming My Authentic Self. Just put that plus Victor Fernandes with an S, not a Z, in the search bar, and his book will come right up. You can get it on Kindle, you can get it on paperback, you can get it on hardcover. It's on all three formats. And it might just be the kick in the pants that you need to, like I said, take the bull by the horns and, make this life that you have absolutely incredible. And with that, Victor said it in sort of a different way. I'm going to say what I usually say when I sign off, which aligns so well with his final words of wisdom, which is keep writing your story because the world needs your voice.